Hi, I'm Florence. My mom hit me so hard I saw stars. My brother, Leo, clapped. My dad, Arthur, just leaned back, smiled a little, and said, "You deserved that." That night, I knew it wasn't me who was the problem. I was just showing them who they really were, and they hated it. So I called three numbers, quietly, calmly, and by morning, their perfect world started to fall apart. But it didn't just start that night. It began a long time ago with fake love, family money used for bad things, and a family that punished me for just trying to live. The real question isn't why they tried to hurt me, it's what happened when I finally stood up. Before we go on, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Leave a comment below. What would you have done if your own family cheered while you were shamed in front of 55 people? The fancy envelope sat on my kitchen counter. It looked like it didn't belong there. My sister, Clara, always loved things that looked good, even if they weren't. I stared at it for a few seconds before opening it. It had been 6 months since anyone in my family had talked to me. No calls, no texts, nothing. The last time I was at their house, Clara yelled that I thought I was better than everyone because I wouldn't put money into her failing fashion business. I left that night with the sound of doors slamming and angry words in my ears. And now this. Inside was an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. Handwritten in her neat handwriting. "Dear Florence, we hope you'll join us for a special Thanksgiving gathering. 3 p.m., family home. Love." Love, huh? I let out a soft scoff. My hands didn't shake from fear. They shook from all the quiet anger inside me. All the things that were never said, never fixed. I sat on my old kitchen chair, the letter in my lap, trying to decide what was worse, staying away or going back. Part of me knew it could be a trap. I wouldn't be surprised if I walked in and found some mean trick waiting. But another part of me, the part that used to cuddle with my mom after bad dreams, that helped my dad fix the garage floor, that sewed Clara's prom dress in 3 nights when her tailor canceled, that part wondered, what if this meant something? My therapist once said, things don't always end nicely. That stuck with me. I bought a train ticket that night, the 9:05 a.m. express train, arriving just after noon in the city of Meadowbrook. I picked a red vintage dress from my closet. My mother always said it made me look cheap. I wore it anyway. With my hair in a simple bun and a coat I hadn't worn since last winter, I felt like I was getting ready for a fight. The train ride felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the gray sky outside, or the woman across from me quietly crying into a napkin. I didn't ask. We all carry our hurts silently. By the time I arrived, the neighborhood looked just as perfect as always. Lawns trimmed, similar cars in similar driveways. When I walked up to the familiar white door, I saw something that made my throat tighten. The little wooden welcome sign above the porch. Clara had changed it. It used to say, "The Millers, all are welcome." Now it said, "Family first, always." The door opened before I could knock. A man in a white shirt stood there holding a tablet. "Name, please," he asked, his voice flat. "Florence Miller," I said, my voice steady. He tapped something, then waved me in. No hug, no warm handshake like Mom used to do, just rules. As I walked in, the smell of roasted turkey and rosemary filled the house, familiar, almost comforting, until I saw the seating chart taped to the side of the food table. Clara, next to Leo, next to Mom, next to Dad. Opposite, guest, far left. Guest. No name, just guest. I swallowed the anger rising in my chest and gave my coat to another staff member, not a family member. No one looked up. No one said, "Oh, Florence, you made it." The first face I knew was Clara's. She walked toward me like an actress about to make a big entrance. Arms out, lips stretched in a perfect smile. "Oh, look who showed up," she announced, loud enough for everyone in the room to turn and look. There was laughter, light, tight, uncomfortable. Dad gave a quick nod from his armchair and didn't move, just sat there, legs crossed, glass in hand. Leo, my brother, walked right past me, said nothing, and took a devil egg from a tray. I went to the only empty chair, hidden behind the food table, farthest from the fireplace. I sat quietly, hands folded, and waited for the awkwardness to pass. But it never did. Conversations swirled around me like I wasn't even there. Small talk, jokes about Leo's promotion, someone's kid getting into a good university. Not a single word for me. Dinner was served just before 4. The turkey looked perfect. The stuffing smelled exactly like it did when I was 15, sneaking bites off the stove when Mom wasn't looking. Plates clinked, glasses lifted. Everyone seemed too practiced. As I reached for the cranberry sauce, I felt it before I saw it. Every eye subtly turning toward the head of the table. My mother stood, her chair creaking as she rose. She tapped her fork once against the rim of her wine glass. Clink. Twice. Clink, clink. Then she looked at me. Not past me, not near me. At me. Her eyes sharp, narrow, like she was about to give a judgment. And I knew this wasn't just a toast. The sound of her fork tapping the glass still rang in my ears when she smiled that hostess smile, the kind that stretched but never softened. "Everyone," my mother began, standing tall at the head of the table, "before we have dessert, I want to say a few words." The room went quiet. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. 50-some people turned toward her, wine glasses in hand. I stayed silent, back straight, trying not to look as tense as I felt. "I look around this room," she continued, sweeping her hand like a performer, "and I see loyalty. I see tradition, and I see family who understands that respect must be earned, never just given." My stomach tightened. Her voice carried across the dining room, warm to the crowd, but sharp as a knife to me. "In every family," she said, "there comes a time when we must remember who we are, where we come from, and more importantly, what we owe each other." She paused, letting her words sink in. I could feel eyes on me, like heat from a stove. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "some daughters forget." A low, polite chuckle went through the table. My wine glass stayed untouched. I felt my hands go cold. "They forget," she went on, "that being humble is important, that success means nothing if you act like you're better than everyone, that family is not a burden, it's an honor." She didn't look at me directly anymore. She didn't need to. Everyone knew who she was talking about. "Money doesn't buy you roots," she said, a sweet smile forming, "and it certainly doesn't buy you love or respect." Another chuckle. Leo snorted, clearly enjoying himself because he felt he had the right to. She took a deep breath, enjoying the end of her speech. "Feeling you deserve everything is ugly, especially in a family." That's when Leo clapped. 1, 2, 3 slow claps. His smirk spread across the room. "That's Mom's best one yet," he mumbled, just loud enough. Clara looked away, swirling her wine, pretending to focus on a cranberry. Dad didn't move a muscle. I sat still like a statue in red, trapped in a room that once held birthday parties and game nights and laughter. Now it was just a stage for my public shaming. I gently pushed back my chair and stood. I didn't say a word, just slid my napkin off my lap and laid it on the plate. I made it 2 steps before it happened. The sound cracked through the room. A hand against my face, hard, immediate. The left side of my cheek burned like fire. It took me a second to realize she'd done it. My mother, her fingers still out, her eyes wide, not with shock, but with satisfaction. Gasps erupted around the room, but no one moved. My wine glass slipped from my hand, hit the marble, and shattered. The sound echoed through the dead silence. Dad finally spoke from his seat, never looked up. "Serves you right." I looked at him, looked at her, looked at the faces I used to know. Now frozen, ashamed, some pleased. Leo shifted in his chair, but didn't stand. Clara sipped her wine again, like this was all just background noise. And I didn't cry. I turned and walked out of the room. No rush, no big show, just left through the hallway that used to smell like cinnamon, past the family photos that stopped including me 5 years ago, past the coat rack I built in high school shop class, out the front door. The November air hit my cheek, now burning in more ways than one, but I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. That sting reminded me. This was real. I sat on the porch steps, just wood under my legs, and silence in the cold. No one followed me, not a single person, not one voice, calling out, not even to pretend. That's when it hit me. Not like a sudden pain, but like a slow truth finally coming into the light. I hadn't lost my family. I never truly had them. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. My hand was steady. I scrolled down to the bottom. 3 names I'd never thought I'd use again. Each one burned like a match in the dark. I tapped the first one. It rang once, twice. Then came the voice, low, knowing. "I've been expecting your call." I didn't smile, just let out a quiet breath and leaned back against the kitchen counter, the edge pressing into my back. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady, "it's time." A pause. Then, with that same calm way of speaking I always admired in him, he replied, "I take it things have gotten worse." "You could say that." "I need you to start the plan we talked about 2 years ago, the money freeze, everything, and file the legal order. We block every way they could move money." I heard the sound of papers being moved. He was already working. "You still have temporary legal power over your mother because of the paper we filed during her recovery. She never took it back. She didn't know how," he said, almost amused. "And your father was too proud to check. You're still the legal gatekeeper, Florence." I closed my eyes. "Then file it. And Daniel, make sure it happens by morning. Quietly, no media, no mess." "You know me," he said smoothly. "I work in the shadows." We ended the call there. No pleasantries, no good lucks, just understanding. I put my phone on the counter and walked into the living room. My place was simple. 2 bedrooms, wood floors, bookshelves that still smelled like old books. But it was mine, every inch of it untouched by their hands. Outside, the street lights cast soft golden circles on the quiet sidewalk, the kind of calm that came before a storm. I unlocked my laptop and dialed the second number. Maria picked up before the second ring. "Florence." Her voice was sleepy. I checked the time. Midnight. "If you're calling, it's not small," she said, instantly awake. I clicked open the folder on my desktop labeled, "For When They Cross the Line." Then I dragged in the phone photos I'd taken earlier that evening in my father's office. Ledgers, handwritten checks, messy cash logs written in blue pen. "They've been taking donor money through the charity," I said, "for Clara's brand and Leo's failing businesses." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "I just sent you the photos. I want you to start checking everything. Match dates, deposits, company accounts. I want a full trail." Clicking, typing, silence. "Florence, if this is true, it's a crime. We're not talking about a small warning." "I'm not looking for warnings. I'm looking for truth." She didn't argue. "I'll start now. Expect a report by afternoon." I leaned back again, my shoulders finally touching the chair. I hadn't realized how long I'd been sitting straight up like I was still at that dinner table. The third call was the shortest. I stood, walked to the window, and dialed Rose. She picked up with a sigh. "This better be good." "It is." I gave her the charity's tax ID number. No explanation, just numbers. Then I sent the cloud link I prepared months ago, containing backups, scans, marked expenses, even security logs from my parents' office network. She didn't ask questions, just said, "You'll get a court paper confirmation within 48 hours. That was all. No good night, no thanks. I stayed at the window after the call. The glow of the city beyond my town was faint, quiet. My own reflection stared back at me, older than I remembered, tired, but not broken. I made tea. It was almost automatic now. Chamomile, a drop of honey, the blue mug with a chipped handle I refused to replace. While the kettle hissed, my mind wandered back. 2 years ago, the house still smelled like medicine and roses from the get well flowers. My mother had been recovering after a difficult surgery, and I had flown back from the city to take care of her. My father had barely been home. Leo was away. Clara only stopped by for social media photos. So it was me, the daughter they forgot, the one changing her bandages, making soup, helping her in and out of bed. And while she slept, I had access to passwords, filing cabinets, signature stamps. At the time, I didn't think I'd ever use it. I just saved it, like someone taping up emergency glass behind a wall, just in case. They never even noticed. Now the kettle clicked off. I poured the tea, sat at the small table by the bookshelf, and watched the steam curl upward like a dancer with no audience. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. That was the old me. Rage was loud. Rage was messy. This was something else. They wanted someone to blame, someone to shame, someone to point at and say, "See, this is what happens when you don't follow the rules." They wanted the quiet daughter to stay quiet. Well, I would be, but now silence would be my weapon. I took one last sip, closed the laptop, and whispered to the empty room, "Now we wait." 27 hours later, the family's accounts were frozen, and the calls started pouring in. I was in my kitchen, stirring a small pot of oatmeal when the first one came in. The screen lit up with "Dad" in big letters. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "There's a problem with the family money," he said, skipping even a hello. "The quarterly transfer didn't go through. I called the bank. They said it's been flagged. Can you check?" His voice wasn't panicked yet, just impatient, like a man used to things working his way. I didn't answer right away. I spooned the oatmeal into a bowl, added a pinch of cinnamon, and walked to the table before replying. "No." There was a moment of silence. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean," I said calmly, "I'm not going to check. You'll have to figure it out another way. You have legal power, and I'm using it." I hung up. The second call came before I'd even taken a bite. Leo. Voicemail, then another and another. By the fourth one, my phone buzzed so hard it rattled against the wooden tabletop. I didn't listen right away. I finished eating first. Then I poured myself some coffee, sat back, and finally pressed play. "You think you're smart," he growled, voice half choked with anger. "You think cutting off the money makes you powerful? We made you, Florence. We fed you. We gave you everything." Next message. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? You always wanted to destroy us. Well, now you have. Are you proud?" Then silence for maybe 2 hours. I spent that time looking over some bills Maria had marked, dates that matched a little too perfectly with Clara's sponsorship fund. It was always called event outreach, right? Outreach to the florist, the venue, and a champagne tasting. At 11:23, Clara called. The ringtone barely rang once before I hit mute. I watched her name fade into missed call, then a voicemail. She sounded breathless, not the spoiled defiance I was used to. This was full-blown panic. They said the payment didn't go through. The venue called me. Florence, not Dad, not Mom, me. You knew how important this was. You knew how long I've planned this. In the background, I could hear a man's voice shouting something. Probably her fiancé. He didn't sound happy. I waited. She kept going. "Do you even care what this does to me, or are you just cruel?" I didn't respond. I just typed one line into our old family group chat. "The family money was never yours to spend." Send. No reply. By early afternoon, Maria texted. Confirmed the venue, florist, catering deposits, all from the charity's other account. Frozen. Not long after, Rose chimed in. Vendors are backing out. Word was spreading. One of them posted in the local wedding planner forum. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the small painting above my desk. A girl walking into a forest. No path, just snow and silence. There was a kind of satisfaction settling over me. Not revenge, just clear understanding. Then came the call. Mom. Her name flashed on screen like a thunderclap. I stood up, poured water into the kettle just to keep my hands busy, and answered. Her voice was cold, controlled. "You shamed me." I didn't flinch. "No," I said softly. "You did that all by yourself. You ruined your sister's wedding." "No," I repeated. "You allowed her to steal from a charity, and now the system did what it's supposed to do. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break laws. I just let truth catch up." She went quiet, but not because she understood. "You were always difficult, Florence. So proper, so obsessed with doing things the hard way. You just don't understand family." "Maybe not your kind," I replied. I ended the call. This time, I didn't even feel my heart race. The day slipped toward evening. I worked quietly, folded laundry, lit a small vanilla candle. Outside, the first snowflakes began falling, soft, slow, like someone above had taken pity and was tucking the world under a blanket. I stood by the window, mug in hand, and watched. For a second, I saw myself, 12 years old, sitting in the back seat of Dad's car while Clara tried on pageant dresses. Leo had made fun of my shoes. I had bought them with my own allowance. "You could try being less weird," he had said. Dad didn't even glance up from his phone. And me? I laughed like it was funny. Like if I agreed with them just enough, I'd belong. That girl was gone. This woman didn't need their approval. She didn't need an invitation to a wedding paid for with stolen money. My thoughts were interrupted by another call. No name, no number, blocked. I let it ring twice, then answered. A quiet breath on the other side. Then a familiar voice said, "Florence, I have something you need to hear about your father." I recognized the voice before she said her name. "Florence, it's Martha. I worked with your Aunt Sarah back then." My hand tightened around the phone. I hadn't heard that name in years. Aunt Sarah had died under what they'd called natural causes a decade ago, the only one who ever stood up to my father and quietly vanished from every family photo and conversation after her funeral. "I kept something," Martha said. "She asked me to. I think it's time you heard it." She didn't say more over the phone, only told me to meet her at the City Records Building, 4th floor, back archive room at 4:30 sharp. I left the house without finishing my tea. The drive was gray. Wet roads, moody clouds, just enough drizzle to make the world feel quiet and suspicious. The kind of weather that makes your windshield wipers squeak like a lie being scrubbed clean. The records building was nearly empty that time of day. The 4th floor smelled like old paper and dusty rules. I found the archive room, door slightly open, and there she was. Martha looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes flicked up and softened. "You came," she said, almost surprised. "You sounded serious." She nodded and walked to a filing cabinet, opened a hidden panel behind it, and pulled out a small brown envelope. "This was Sarah's insurance," she whispered, "in case something ever happened to her, or in case they tried to erase her." Inside was a USB drive. Plain, no label, no markings. She pressed it into my hand like it was burning. "Keep it off Wi-Fi. Trust me." I stared at her. "What's on it?" Martha didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Proof of who your father really was." By the time I got home, it was nearly 7 p.m. I turned off my phone, closed the blinds, and sat down at the kitchen counter with my old laptop. No internet, no Bluetooth, just the bare machine and the drive. I hesitated before plugging it in. The file was labeled 2011-049 Sarah Audio. I hit play. At first, just static, then footsteps. A woman's voice, Sarah's, muttering something about the recorder, and then my father's voice. "So, here's the plan. We call it a family fund. Make it look clean. The girls' names go on the papers. That'll keep it legal." Another voice, my mother's, smooth, planned. "And the tax people, they'll be looking soon. You saw the audit timeline." Dad again. "We push the real money through the fake construction company, then hide the money under the new fund. Only Leo gets the codes. We don't need the girls digging." A pause, then a chuckle. "Florence won't even notice. She's too busy being good. She won't ask questions." I stopped the playback. My breath caught like I'd swallowed glass. They hadn't just left me out. They'd used me. My name, my identity, my silence. I wasn't the ignored daughter. I was the decoy. I let the file play again, this time all the way through. They spoke about fake papers, moving money in small amounts just under the reporting limits, creating fake bills. My mother said something about a retirement home in another country. Father laughed, said he'd hide the papers in plain sight. I sat there long after the file ended, staring at nothing. All these years, I thought I was just invisible. But no, being seen was never the issue. They saw me clearly, saw exactly what they could get away with using me for. Eventually, I pulled out my folder with copies of the family fund papers, the signatures. My name was there twice, except I'd never signed. I checked the notary stamp, dated 2011, an old name I didn't recognize. I called Daniel, my lawyer, and told him everything. He whistled low. "Forgery, stealing money, internet fraud. This is enough to start a criminal investigation. And the notary retired in another state. But if we can show a pattern, I want this known. He didn't try to slow me down, just said, I'll get the paperwork started. After the call, I sat back and tried to breathe. The room was dark, except for the small light above the stove. I found myself staring at the bookshelf across the room. One of the book spines caught my eye. A photo album. My 12th birthday. We were in the old house then. The one with the attic no one wanted to clean. That's where Sarah used to hide her journals. I remembered climbing up there once, trying to find a present she'd hidden. That's when I heard Dad yell, not at me, but at Sarah. You cross me again, and I'll make sure you regret ever being part of this family. And Sarah, she didn't cry. She didn't yell back. She just said, Florence is going to see it all one day. And when she does, don't expect mercy. I hadn't understood it then, but I did now. Later that night, I looked deeper into the papers, checked dates, noticed a sudden change in the family fund's wording after 2011. Everything pointed to hiding things, a wall of financial fog. But the line that kept echoing, only Leo gets the codes. They'd locked me out from the start. And worse, they counted on me not fighting back. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a plan. A few minutes before midnight, I sent the audio file to 3 people. Daniel, a tax contact I knew from a charity audit last year, and Clara. She'd been screaming about her wedding falling apart. She wanted to know why. Now she'd know. 5 minutes later, a text blinked onto my screen from Clara. Just 3 words. What the hell? I hadn't even set the laptop down when the doorbell rang. Not a light, polite ring. It was fast, impatient, a jarring sound against the quiet hum of my thoughts. I walked to the door, still gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, my fingertips cold. Through the peephole, I saw her, Clara, still in that stiff blue jacket she'd worn at the last meeting. Hair up but messy, mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes, her knuckles white from holding her phone tight. I opened the door without a word. She didn't wait to be asked in, just stepped across the doorway and held out her phone. Was that real? I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I only nodded. Clara slowly lowered her arm like it had been holding something heavier than it looked. She leaned back against the wall near the coat rack, her breath shaky. They told me you left because you were selfish, she whispered. Said you didn't want to be part of the family, that you thought you were better than us. I closed the door behind her. No, I said quietly. I left because I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have proof until now. She didn't speak, just stood there, eyes darting around my small kitchen like she couldn't quite believe where she was, like she'd stepped into a world she'd always avoided. I didn't, she said finally, voice cracking. I mean, I knew things didn't add up, but I thought I was imagining it. I motioned toward the dining table. She sat stiffly, like the chair might collapse under the weight of the past. We sat in silence for a few moments, her elbows resting on the table, palms over her face. They always told me, she began, not looking up, that you were different. Mom told me when I was 14, Florence isn't like us. She's adopted in spirit. Don't ever trust her with real things. I didn't even know what that meant. Then my heart tightened, but I kept my face still. That's why you stopped telling me anything. She looked up, her face red. I thought I was protecting the family. They made it sound like you were dangerous, disloyal, and when you left, they said you'd taken money, that you were angry because you weren't named in the first family fund. I let out a soft laugh, tired, bitter. I didn't even know there was a family fund until last year. Clara looked like she'd been slapped. She rubbed her forehead hard, like she could scrub the memory away. I thought I was the favorite, but now I don't think they ever loved me. Not really. I was just useful. She paused, then said, I thought I was the face of the family. Turns out I was the mask they wore to keep their secrets. I watched her fall apart, and for a moment, I didn't feel angry. I just felt sad for both of us. You still have a choice, I said quietly. You can keep pretending none of this happened, or you can help me bring it all to light. Clara looked at me, eyes watery. How? I need you to sign a sworn statement that you heard them talk about the family fund, especially what Dad said, that you knew the version I received wasn't what was signed. We'll file it with the investigation." Clara hesitated. "That would make me part of it. I'd be exposed." I nodded. "But you'll also be free." She looked down at her phone. Her fingers hovered over it for a moment, then slowly set it face down on the table. "I'm done protecting monsters," she said. "Whatever you need, I'll sign it." I let out a slow breath. My shoulders had been tense so long I hadn't even realized it. We didn't say anything else for a while, just sat there like two women waking from the same bad dream. Eventually, I got up to pour us both a glass of water. When I set hers down, she was staring off toward the bookshelf. I followed her gaze. "You remember the attic?" she asked. I blinked. "At the old house? Yeah, when we were kids. You had that stuffed fox. What did you name it?" "Marble. Marble the fox. He was missing one eye." She smiled faintly. "You used to bring him up there with snacks, and I'd sneak in with a flashlight. We made a whole secret sister club, you remember?" "I do," I said. "You made me promise you'd never marry anyone unless he passed our code test." She laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "And I promised I'd always have your back." She looked down again. I guess I broke that. I didn't say anything. I just reached across the table and rested my hand near hers. She didn't pull away. The moment passed, quiet and fragile. Then her phone buzzed, vibrating against the wood. She picked it up and froze. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up slowly. "You might want to sit down." I didn't move. "Dad just filed an emergency request in court," she said. "He's trying to block access to the family fund, says you're a security threat to the estate." I stood up, not fast, not dramatic, but on purpose. My mind didn't race, but my hands, they curled into fists, not in fear, in readiness. It was time for the hearing. We arrived at the courthouse just before noon. A quiet drizzle had started, nothing dramatic, just enough to make the sidewalks shine and the world feel slightly colder than it was. I stepped out of the car, briefcase in hand, and followed my lawyer through the side entrance, used for scheduled hearings. No reporters, not yet. The marble floors of the courthouse were polished to a mirror shine. The halls echoed faintly with footsteps and the quiet talking of legal staff moving between rooms. Inside courtroom B, the air felt artificially cool, like all warmth had been removed, fitting considering who was sitting across from me. My father wore a dark gray suit, darker than usual, with a red tie so perfectly tied it looked like a warning. My mother sat beside him in cream and pearls, stiff-backed and still. She didn't look at me. Leo sat on the other side, arms folded, jaw tight like it was wired shut. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Stone, adjusted his silver cufflinks and gave me a long, smooth smile that didn't reach his eyes. We took our seats. The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s named Judge Evans, entered, her robes brushing the polished floor. "This is an emergency request filed by Mr. Arthur Miller to reverse the court-ordered freeze on the Miller Family Fund," she said, her voice clear. "All parties present?" Mr. Stone stood. "Yes, Your Honor, and with your permission, I'd like to begin." "Proceed." He adjusted his tie and stepped forward, hands folded at his waist. "Your Honor, the court has been misled by a series of emotional claims made by Miss Florence Miller, who, while smart, has a documented history of emotional problems from a difficult childhood. This recent action, freezing the family's money, was not only impulsive but done for revenge. She's acting from a place of anger, not justice." I felt my lawyer, Miss Green, shift beside me, calmly, unshaken. Mr. Stone continued, "The family fund, Your Honor, has provided for many generations of Millers. To stop it based on one heir's accusations without full proof or fair process risks serious financial harm. We ask for the immediate lifting of the freeze and for Mr. Miller to be put back as the only manager." He stepped back, pleased and calm. Judge Evans turned to us. "Miss Green, your response." She stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Miss Miller would like to speak directly to the court." The judge nodded. I rose slowly, aware of the silence, the way even the court reporter paused slightly as I took the stand. My heels clicked softly on the tile, a steady rhythm. I was sworn in, sat down, and looked directly at the judge. When I froze the family fund, it wasn't because I was angry, I said. It was because I finally had proof. I paused, let the words settle. For years, I wondered why papers didn't match, why my name was left off important money decisions despite promises, why my father's signatures kept appearing, and mine did too, even when I'd never signed anything. I suspected fraud, but I didn't act because suspicion isn't proof. I looked at Mr. Stone, then at my father. Now I have more than suspicion. Miss Green walked to the front and handed a thick file to the clerk. "Your Honor," she said, "we're submitting 2 key pieces of evidence. First, a set of family fund papers with Miss Miller's fake signature compared to real samples from earlier filings. Second, an audio file. In this recording, Mr. Miller is heard clearly talking about lying about money, including hiding funds under his daughter's names to avoid tax checks." Judge Evans raised an eyebrow. "You have the audio?" "We do. It was obtained legally through a recorded phone call with a witness who has since given a sworn statement." Judge Evans leaned slightly forward. "Play it." The courtroom went still. A tech assistant rolled in a small speaker and pressed play. There it was, my father's voice, clear and unhurried. "We'll move the rest under Clara's name. She doesn't ask questions. Florence is too nosy. We'll tell her she's not part of the plan. Make it about her attitude. Keep her out. If the tax people look, we're clean on paper." Leo's voice chimed in faintly, laughing. "You're heartless." And then my father again, chuckling. "No, I'm careful." No one breathed. The courtroom held its breath like a single body. Even Mr. Stone's fake calm broke. He blinked, his jaw tightening. My mother stared at the floor. Leo leaned back, pale. The judge looked straight at my father. "Mr. Miller, is that your voice?" My father hesitated. "That's sufficient," she cut him off. The room remained silent except for the sound of the judge writing a note. Judge Evans turned to the clerk. "Request denied. The freeze on the Miller Family Fund remains in full effect. Furthermore, I'm sending this matter for immediate review by federal authorities under suspicion of money fraud and lying under oath. Mr. Miller, Miss Clara Miller, and Mr. Leo Miller are to provide full information within 7 business days." Mr. Stone tried to stand, but the judge raised her hand. "This isn't a discussion. Court adjourned." The gavel struck like a gunshot. I stood, gathering my coat, keeping my movements steady. Behind me, I heard my father rise, sudden, angry. I was halfway to the hallway when his voice came sharp and low behind me. "You think you've won?" I stopped, turned, looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said. "I think I've begun." He said nothing. His mouth opened, then shut, his fists clenched at his sides, but there was nothing left to say. Not in that room, not today. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds hadn't cleared yet, but there was a lightness in the air that hadn't been there before, the kind that comes just before the storm breaks for good. I didn't say another word. I just walked. The first knock came 2 days later at exactly 7:36 in the morning. The sun had barely lifted above the line of trees in the town of Willow Creek, the sky a dull gray, like it hadn't decided if the day deserved light or not. From inside the Miller estate, it must have seemed like just another Thursday, calm, silent, safe from the problems that had been building long before this morning. Then came the second knock, firmer. And then the doorbell held down long enough to signal this wasn't some neighbor returning a wrong package. Leo was the first to reach the front door. He opened it to a group of people in navy jackets, clean and serious. One of them said, holding up a badge before Leo could say a word, "Tax Department, Federal Enforcement Division. We have a warrant." Behind them, a line of agents stepped forward quietly, some with rolling cases, others with clear plastic bins. One carried a handheld scanner. Another had gloves already on. They moved like they'd done this before, because they had. I wasn't there, of course. I was in my home, standing in my kitchen, reheating yesterday's coffee, and staring out at the backyard fence when my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. No text, just a photo. A close-up shot of cardboard evidence boxes being wheeled down the front steps of the Miller house, each labeled with printed tags, Fund 14C, Holdings 1996-2020, Miller/Leo Digital Archives. I didn't smile. I just whispered, "You opened this door. I just held the mirror." Back in Willow Creek, panic had already broken loose inside. Leo's wife let out a sharp scream when agents entered the hallway and headed toward the study. I was told she stood frozen for a second, then burst into loud sobs before locking herself in the downstairs guest room. Their mother, pale and shaking in her silk robe, collapsed onto the living room sofa and let out a faint cry for smelling salts, like she was performing for an invisible audience. One of the agents offered her a glass of water. She didn't take it. And my father? He marched down the stairs, still half-dressed, and demanded, loudly and with the fake confidence of a man too used to being obeyed, that everyone stop this nonsense and get the family lawyer on the line immediately. The lead agent, a middle-aged woman with very straight posture, handed him the warrant calmly. "This is a federal investigation, sir. You can contact your lawyer, but the search continues." He didn't like that. Apparently, he stood there for a good 20 seconds, lips pressed so tight they disappeared. Then he stepped aside, muttering something about witch hunts and media vultures. In Leo's office, things turned quiet and precise. Cabinets were opened. USB drives labeled "consulting" were put in bags. His laptop was copied and returned. Papers were photographed and logged before being boxed. Then, one of the younger agents, while sifting through a heavy wooden filing cabinet, tapped something metallic at the back panel. It sounded hollow. He paused, slid the entire row of files aside, and there it was, a small hidden space built into the back wall of the cabinet. Inside, tucked neatly beside an old cigar case, was a black leather notebook, soft and worn, like it had been handled often. No title, just a strap around it. They carefully opened it. Every page was handwritten. Dates, amounts, bank numbers, abbreviations, and something else. Names, not full ones, just codes, but they were clear. F01, C91, L73. Birth months and years, family birth dates. Mine, Clara's, Leo's. Transfers to hidden accounts, movements between fake funds. It wasn't smart. It was arrogant. When the agent showed it to Leo, he tried to laugh. "That's just notes for tax planning," he said. "Everyone keeps notes." The agent didn't blink. "Then you can explain it to the prosecutor." Hours later, the house had been swept clean of its secrets. The agents left with 12 boxes, 2 hard drives, and 1 black notebook that now sat at the center of a growing case. I learned all this in bits and pieces, texts, calls, whispers from former staff who still had loyalties that didn't belong to my parents. But what stayed with me most wasn't the files or the screaming or even the knock. It was Clara. She didn't call, she just showed up. Around 6:40 that evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, she was standing there in jeans and a navy sweater, holding a ceramic casserole dish in her hands, the kind you bake for someone when there's been a death or a confession. She looked tired, but there was something else, too, a quiet acceptance that I hadn't seen on her face in years. "I made lasagna," she said quietly. "It was your favorite back then." I stepped aside. "Come in." We ate at the kitchen table in near silence. No music, no TV, just the clink of forks and the hum of the refrigerator. At one point, I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out an old photo, creased and slightly faded. It was from one of our sleepovers as kids, back when she still wore glasses too big for her face, and we built blanket forts in the living room. I placed it between us on the table. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Do you think she ever loved either of us?" I didn't have an answer, but she looked at me again, this time with tears forming. I asked her that today. I leaned back, listening. "She slapped me," Clara said, voice flat, "just like she used to." "And you?" I didn't move. I just turned around and left. We finished the lasagna, no leftovers. She stayed until almost 9 p.m. Then she stood, thanked me, and left without asking for anything. That night, just before I went to bed, I checked the mailbox. It was late, past 10 p.m., but something told me to go. Inside was a single envelope, certified, cream-colored, no return address printed, but in the corner, handwritten in a shaky but familiar script, were 5 words: "To the rightful heir, A.M." I stared at it for a moment, heartbeat slow but steady. Then I closed the door, turned off the porch light, and held it against my chest. Whatever came next wasn't theirs to steal anymore. I didn't even make it to the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, the envelope trembling in my hands. When I slid my finger under the seal, I expected bank statements, maybe legal threats. But instead, what fell out first was something smaller, thicker than a page, a USB drive. I froze. Then I turned the envelope upside down, and a folded letter slipped out, handwritten in my grandfather's unmistakable script, those slow, looping strokes that used to sign my report cards with a smiley face. It smelled faintly of pipe smoke and cedar, like the cabin he always loved more than people.
I wasn't there, of course. I was in my home, standing in my kitchen, reheating yesterday's coffee, and staring out at the backyard fence when my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. No text, just a photo. A close-up shot of cardboard evidence boxes being wheeled down the front steps of the Miller house, each labeled with printed tags. Fund 14C, Holdings 1996-2020, Miller/Leo Digital Archives. I didn't smile. I just whispered, "You opened this door. I just held the mirror." Back in Willow Creek, panic had already broken loose inside. Leo's wife let out a sharp scream when agents entered the hallway and headed toward the study. I was told she stood frozen for a second, then burst into loud sobs before locking herself in the downstairs guest room. Their mother, pale and shaking in her silk robe, collapsed onto the living room sofa and let out a faint cry for smelling salts, like she was performing for an invisible audience. One of the agents offered her a glass of water. She didn't take it. And my father? He marched down the stairs still half-dressed and demanded, loudly and with the fake confidence of a man too used to being obeyed, that everyone stop this nonsense and get the family lawyer on the line immediately. The lead agent, a middle-aged woman with very straight posture, handed him the warrant calmly. "This is a federal investigation, sir. You can contact your lawyer, but the search continues." He didn't like that. Apparently, he stood there for a good 20 seconds, lips pressed so tight they disappeared. Then he stepped aside, muttering something about witch hunts and media vultures. In Leo's office, things turned quiet and precise. Cabinets were opened. USB drives labeled consulting were put in bags. His laptop was copied and returned. Papers were photographed and logged before being boxed. Then, one of the younger agents, while sifting through a heavy wooden filing cabinet, tapped something metallic at the back panel. It sounded hollow. He paused, slid the entire row of files aside, and there it was. A small, hidden space built into the back wall of the cabinet. Inside, tucked neatly beside an old cigar case, was a black leather notebook, soft and worn like it had been handled often. No title, just a strap around it. They carefully opened it. Every page was handwritten. Dates, amounts, bank numbers, abbreviations, and something else. Names, not full ones, just codes, but they were clear. F01, C91, L73. Birth months and years, family birth dates. Mine, Clara's, Leo's. Transfers to hidden accounts, movements between fake funds. It wasn't smart. It was arrogant. When the agent showed it to Leo, he tried to laugh. "That's just notes for tax planning," he said. "Everyone keeps notes." The agent didn't blink. "Then you can explain it to the prosecutor." Hours later, the house had been swept clean of its secrets. The agents left with 12 boxes, 2 hard drives, and 1 black notebook that now sat at the center of a growing case. I learned all this in bits and pieces. Texts, calls, whispers from former staff who still had loyalties that didn't belong to my parents. But what stayed with me most wasn't the files, or the screaming, or even the knock. It was Clara. She didn't call. She just showed up. Around 6:40 that evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, she was standing there, in jeans and a navy sweater, holding a ceramic casserole dish in her hands, the kind you bake for someone when there's been a death or a confession. She looked tired, but there was something else too, a quiet acceptance that I hadn't seen on her face in years. "I made lasagna," she said quietly. "It was your favorite back then." I stepped aside. "Come in." We ate at the kitchen table in near silence. No music, no TV, just the clink of forks and the hum of the refrigerator. At one point, I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out an old photo, creased and slightly faded.
It was from one of our sleepovers as kids, back when she still wore glasses too big for her face, and we built blanket forts in the living room. I placed it between us on the table. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "Do you think she ever loved either of us?" I didn't have an answer, but she looked at me again, this time with tears forming. I asked her that today. I leaned back, listening. "She slapped me," Clara said, voice flat, "just like she used to." "And you?" I didn't move. I just turned around and left. We finished the lasagna, no leftovers. She stayed until almost 9 p.m. Then she stood, thanked me, and left without asking for anything. That night, just before I went to bed, I checked the mailbox. It was late, past 10 p.m., but something told me to go. Inside was a single envelope, certified, cream-colored, no return address printed, but in the corner, handwritten in a shaky but familiar script, were 5 words: "To the rightful heir, A.M." I stared at it for a moment, heartbeat slow but steady. Then I closed the door, turned off the porch light, and held it against my chest. Whatever came next wasn't theirs to steal anymore. I didn't even make it to the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, the envelope trembling in my hands. When I slid my finger under the seal, I expected bank statements, maybe legal threats. But instead, what fell out first was something smaller, thicker than a page, a USB drive. I froze. Then I turned the envelope upside down and a folded letter slipped out, handwritten in my grandfather's unmistakable script, those slow looping strokes that used to sign my report cards with a smiley face. It smelled faintly of pipe smoke and cedar, like the cabin he always loved more than people.